Every great creative work stands on the shoulders of giants. Welcome to RetroInspection, where we examine and find out where the things we love today came from.
When you think about who he inspired in modern times, what comes to mind for me are House of the Dragon, all the George R.R. Martin sword and sorcery type stuff. I think probably, some of the fantasy novelists, all of these people had to have been inspired by Robert Howard and Conan.
It depends. I mean, sword and sorcery exists as a subset of fantasy overall, for a reason, in that it is distinctive from what we think of as high fantasy, your Tolkien type stuff. Right off the top of my head, I would say definitely Michael Moorcock and Fritz Leiber, I think are two of the guys that I would name as pretty obviously influenced by Howard. You've read more and seen more of Martin stuff than I have, but it feels like those kind of shoot down the middle. There's a balance of high fantasy elements and sword and sorcery stuff. And graphic violence, I think, or relatively graphic, again, standards vary with the era. It seems to me like that's kind of the deciding factor as to which camp you land in. How does that feel to you?
Well, yes, I think that the Martin books definitely are very violent and graphically so. So they would belong in this camp. I think the difference between the Conan books and, say, Game of Thrones is that there's not one hero character that George R.R. Martin relies on. He's got, he populates his books with 10 different main characters. Conan is always the central figure in Howard's books. And in some ways, the Conan stories are a little bit more satisfying because they have, we're never going to get a Game of Thrones ending, but, there's an ending to the stories that Howard wrote for Conan.
Yeah.
And they exist. You could pick up any one of Howard's novellas, it seems to me, read it, and not have to worry about the 10 other short stories or novellas that Howard wrote, because they stand on their own.
Yeah, and even so, there's usually a fair amount of exposition. We talked about his 8,000 word essay, The Hyborian Age, which kind of lays out the whole history of all this stuff and sketches of all the various peoples of this world, and it's kind of a slog. I found it kind of a slog to get through.
Yes,
but like I said, like you said, it does function as a Bible for these stories. If you've read that, you kind of what's going on when he talks about this type of person or that type of person. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, those guys, and because you've already gotten a little bit of backstory. But even within the stories, you get some of those, and we were talking about his how do I put this politely, racial and ethnic attitudes.
That
there's
really shows more in
Hyperion.
There's
subtext. Yeah, but there's subtext for that even within the stories.
Like, subscribe, repost, share everywhere. To see what else we're up to, visit xynobooks.com, xenobooks.com.